Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to drive in the new seal on the driver's side. This horn part goes out. We've determined that the best way to do it is to get a large socket. This is a 1 3/8 inch socket. It actually fits nicely inside of that, nice and snug. And then we're going to take some socket extensions from the passenger side, hook it on there, and actually drive this into place. And the reason you need this is because the surface here, there's not any real good area to make contact except for inside there where the socket fits real nicely, because you have to drive it in straight. Alright, so we're going to push the new seal in place there. We can just line it up there and then we'll get the socket up here. And you really want to take some time with this part. This is the hardest part of the job, is just getting these seals seated.
How are we doing on top to bottom centeredness?
We're good.
So the weight being pushed on is good?
Yep.
All right.
So you want to drive it straight in.
You ready?
Yep.
How are we doing?
Good.
Is it moving?
Yep, keep going. Okay. Let's back it out a little bit. Alright, we're going to have to keep going. So with the socket, we got that new seal driven in there, nice and square. So now we're going to use our 3-foot threaded rod to pull the axle seal in on the passenger side. I've put a little tape on the threaded rod here to protect the seal when we put it in place. So what we're going to do is we're going to put the threaded rod through the axle, set the seal in place here, and this is where you want to take your washers. I've got a nut on there. These large washers are going to go on there. These are going to pull that in place. Then I'm going to take a series of smaller washers, just give some backing, and put a nut on it on the very end. Tighten that all down. Then when you put this in the axle to pull it in, it'll stay nice and sturdy. You have to do it this way because on the back side of this seal, there's really nothing to push on except the outer rim here. So that's where these washers come in contact real nice. Get it all lined up there like that, and we'll tighten it down and pull it in place. Alright, because we don't have a lot of room to work with, this is the seal that we got to pull into place. So putting the seal on that threaded rod, and then putting that large washer as a backing for it, and then a couple other smaller washers to just help hold it in place. So this whole assembly will help pull that seal nicely into place. Okay, I need your rod out a bit.
Can I kind of pull on it?
Yeah. Ouch.
This is how we're tightening this. It's our threaded rod into the axle tube out to here with our washers, and we're using a simple weight has a backing plate, a place to tighten against.
Alright, so we got the new seal like pulled into place there. And the reason this works, well, it's hard to record and hold a light at the same time. There we go. The reason it works with the washer is because the shift motor housing here, the opening is just a little bit bigger than that seal. So that's why you can use a bigger washer like this and it'll fit down in there and push that seal in place. So this is the washer that's just a little bit bigger than that seal, so it pushes nicely on the rim all the way around and seated it in there nice and square. Alright, now we're going to take just a little bit of gear oil and kind of lube up the new seals here. Okay, so we're using some brake cleaner to clean the axle off. Then we're going to use some axle grease. We're going to grease up the splines real good and a little bit on the axle. We're going to do this for all of the axles. So we're getting some grease on the splines of the intermediate axle and the outer axles here. Alright, we're also going to clean up the differential cover here. Scrape off all the old RTV, clean it out with some brake cleaner. Alright, next comes the differential. We're going to simply slip it back into place. Alright, so now we're putting these bearing caps back in place. Exactly in the same order that it came out. Alright, we're torquing those bearing caps to 75 foot-pounds. Alright, we got the bearing caps torqued in there good. Now just kind of spin the drive shaft a little bit, make sure it turns freely. Next we'll put the axles back in. Alright, now you're going to slip the axle back in, being very careful not to dry it through dirt and stuff on the inside of the axle. And also you don't want to end up pushing that new seal out, so just guide it in very gentle.
I need you to hold. Yeah. You got it?
Yep.
Push.
Putting a little bit of grease on the hub assembly here just to make it easier to take it apart next time. Okay, we got the hub assembly back in, the backing plate back on there, and then your 3 bolts here. We're torquing to 75 foot-pounds. Okay, now we're gonna ease the intermediate shaft in place. This one's a little tricky because you got to do it without knocking out your new seal, and it just barely fits through there. So I'm going to help him guide this one in. Alright, now we're Placing the shift collar back in place. Alright, now we're going to place the passenger side outer axle in place. Be very careful to not drag it through any dirt. Alright, and the shift collar and everything back in. Alright, we're going to put the cover back on. I got a new gasket there. And we're going to put a little bit of grease on this fork right here before we slip it back in place. Obviously, be sure this fork engages the collar in there. So you're torquing the hub bolts to 75 foot-pounds?
Yes.
And we got the housing back on, and we're going to torque those to 108 inch-pounds. Alright, now we're going to put the tie rod back into place. Under the steering knuckle here. Put the castle nut back on. And we're going to torque this to 35 foot-pounds. And put a cotter pin in. Okay, next we're going to reassemble the brakes here. Okay, now we're reassembling the brakes. I got a little high temperature grease here and here, keeping it off of the rotors. And now we're going to place our brake caliper mounting bolts, and we're going to torque those to 132 inch-pounds. Whenever you're messing with the brakes, be sure to check your master cylinder, top off the fluid if needed, make sure it's not spilling over. Now we got a good bead of RTV all the way around, and we're going to install the diff cover here. Got the differential cover back on, just a little bit of RTV squeezing out around the bolts. I have them just finger tight right now. I'll let it dry for about an hour, then I'll come back and tighten it down a little bit more. Alright, next we're going to put the wheels back on and torque the lug nuts to 100 foot-pounds. Okay, now we're going to add the gear oil to the differential. We're going to fill it up until it starts spilling out of the fill hole there. Usually take about a bottle and a half. Alright, now we're going to replace the plug for the fill hole, and we're going to torque that to 25 foot-pounds. Alright, there you go. That's how you replace the axle seals on my Jeep Wrangler here with a Dana 30. And check out some of my other Jeep repair videos. Have a good day.